Channing Frye is a former NBA player, obviously now covers the league. He offered up this opinion on his podcast.
Nostalgia is killing the NBA. The 90s basketball, Michael Jordan and Kobe, was not as clean as y'all think it was. Y'all forget that Jordan left the league for 2 years. Y'all forget that Kobe, rest in peace, quit on his team in the playoffs and did not shoot the basketball. So all this Kobe, Jordan, oh, he's not this, he's not that. That is propaganda. Every great player, whether that's Ant, Wemby, Bron, Steph, this, that. They compare him to 40 years ago. The rules weren't even the same. You're not really watching help side defense. Who's doing this? What is this rule? What is that rule? You're not watching. Nobody celebrates these new people. So why the would anybody want to be the face of this league where you're going to get on every network for not being somebody from 40 years ago? It's ridiculous. It is unfair. Bron is one of the greatest players ever to play. Stephen Curry is one of the greatest players ever to play. Giannis is one of the great. Jokic. And you know what we do? We talk about Michael Jordan. All this superstar era is over. The hard cap called the second apron, it's over. Teams are going to take over.
Look, there's a lot of spitfire there, right? He goes to the players are done and teams are taking over. He says everybody's compared to Michael Jordan. They are not. He said there's a ton of nostalgia. There is. But that's with anything, right? You ever heard this? They don't make them like they used to. No, they don't. They have air conditioning now, right? They have cruise control. They have adaptive control where you don't actually have to have hands-free driving, Bluetooth, and other things. Yeah. So I think what Channing is mostly reacting to is daytime TV and inside the NBA, and maybe a little bit of social media. The fact is that we do celebrate guys. Do we pick apart their flaws? Yeah, that's more how broadcasting has gone, and especially so in basketball. I actually believe this I don't want to know if it's narrative or belief, that inside the NBA can do some damage to the current NBA just because it gives off, they just say, hey, look, basically guys were tougher, guys, it mattered more, everything was better back when they played. But that's every old guy in basketball. Football, they do it as well, though, right? How many football guys have you seen covering football that will say, football's getting soft. Can't hit a guy when he goes over the middle. Can't touch a quarterback. Football is soft. Has it adjusted football's numbers at all? No. Now, there's lots of quarterbacks who cover the game, the Dan Orlovskis of the world, and others who all they do is have praise for quarterbacks, even when those quarterbacks aren't as good as Orlovsky sometimes makes them out to be. So I think that helps kind of the narrative of the game, if you will. But the reality is we're just as harsh to football players as we are to basketball players. There is more drama, maybe because it's covered more or people have their own social media outlets as well. And I think what it comes down to is, inside the NBA can sound like some bitter old guys talking about, back in my day, it was amazing. And the league's numbers reflect the fact that it's just very hard to gamble on. Really hard to gamble on. But I don't think only one player is compared to Jordan. That's LeBron. Right? No one's ever said, Luka has to do this to beat Jordan. Or Giannis has to do this. We always compare different generations of player. Do it in baseball a ton. This is where Channing, and again, I'm not close to Channing, but I have friends that are really close with Channing, and they all love him. But this is where, in all honesty, he grew up a hooper who's doing a podcast, not a guy who was a sports guy who played hoop and then did a podcast. By that, I mean he doesn't have the true perspective. Because if you don't like being compared to guys in the past, you think it's hurting the sport, ask Jason Stewart, who loves baseball. Baseball, everything is about comparing you to the legacy players. And it's really hard with the steroid era guys. And that's everything. Football, some. Obviously, the sport has evolved so much, and he's right that basketball has evolved, and it's very different. And I've said that we do look back at the 80s, 90s regular season hoop as if it was really good, and it was not. But the guys did play more often. The game was more physical. The rules were different, and the players are more skilled now. I mean, Jay Stu, am I wrong? Like any baseball player, he's acting like it's basketball and basketball alone that compares players to the players of the past. Nobody does that more than baseball. Now, baseball's not crazy popular on the national, more on the regional level, but nobody does that more than baseball.
Correct. And in comparing today's player in baseball to yesterday's is aggravating for me because, and I'm going to get around to what I think Channing was getting to as well. I think Channing's getting to an effort thing here. No one ever questions Michael Jordan's effort or willingness to compete. And much of the conversation that was had on talk radio last week, and as you said, the daytime debate shows, was about the NBA and effort. And I'm going to let Dan say his take on himself, but I'm paraphrasing here. Dan said something very interesting on Friday. Right, Dan? All we're asking these guys to do is to try.
That's correct. Yes. Especially with the All-Star game. Everybody's telling the players on what they want, and that's just to give effort. And it does translate into the regular season, but it's just a simple message.
Yeah, in fairness, though, Dan, how bad was the Pro Bowl before they canceled the Pro Bowl in terms of effort?
Oh, yeah, it was awful.
Okay. And baseball is still probably the best, but it's not nearly what it used to be in terms of its competitiveness. It truly is just an exhibition game, more so than it's ever been previously. So I'm not disagreeing with you, Dan. I'm not disagreeing with you, Jason. I'm not disagreeing with the sports fan who says we carry around this assumption that the NBA's guys, because they have guaranteed contracts, because they will opt out of games in the regular season and not play on back-to-backs, that they don't show the consistency of effort that we believe is required for their gargantuan salaries. That's fair. But we use the All-Star game, and then we sit there and go like, come on, man. Like all the All-Star games are a joke. Or in Major League Baseball. Remember when we had pitchers that would go 7 or 8 innings? Yeah, now we have bullpen days, and we have the opener, not even the starter. Right? We're constantly pulling guys. So this is in all of sports. And maybe it's working smarter, not harder, but that's not how we like our sports. The point of it is, I don't think any of the critique is wrong, but I think it's wrong to say it's a basketball only. The perception is that it's basketball. The reality is this is how any of us who are old enough to have watched the previous generation views this generation. Whether it's like Tom Izzo said, soft, or as Dan Byer said, not showing the supreme amount of effort that we believe inherently the previous generation did.
And my point in this specific instance was the NBA trying to tell us or trying to do all of these different things to make the All-Star game work. When everybody is just saying, guys, just try. You don't have to change up teams. You don't have to draft teams. You don't have to make a bracket. You don't have to bring the Rising Stars team into the bracket to try to make these guys try. Everybody just wants to see effort. That's as simple as it was, but for some reason, the league doesn't listen. And I think, like as you talk about on back-to-backs, and I mean, I just did an update about 10 minutes ago, and Kawhi and Norman Powell aren't playing tonight against the Pistons. They didn't play yesterday either. Chet Holmgren's out tonight for the Thunder against Minnesota. Those are things that may bother some people, and maybe others it's just today's NBA. But at what point is it just, is it only a 10-week season for the NBA playoffs? And you talk about baseball in the long season that it is. I would even take your sport, Doug, in college basketball and say, you asked us at the top, why do we watch the NBA? I kind of wondered, I kind of thought that's actually a pretty good question on why. And then I thought to myself, well, why do I watch college basketball when really it's all about the tournament? It's about the atmosphere, it's about the play, it's about the intensity, and going on the road in conference play and getting a big win is a huge deal. And there's effort putting in all of those things. Now, in the grand scheme of things, what's the difference between a 3 and a 4 seed? Like, nobody really knows. But for some reason, you're wrapped up into that. And that's what I think is missing in the NBA is just of what a win would be, to go on the road and win in Denver like the Lakers did this past weekend. I think we actually probably took more from that than any other game, and I'm not sure how much people are actually taking from that win from the Lakers. So I think it's a pretty interesting question that you posed about why do we watch, and I think we just want to be entertained with high quality, effort-filled basketball.
Yeah, and I want it totally fair. I also think it's interesting. I've always watched classic games and thought, I don't think they played as hard. They may have played more consistently, as hard as our perception of how they played is. But again, a lot to get to here.